Welcome to Ryan's Running Reviews in partnership with Road Runner Sports, and today we're taking a look at the slightly updated Hoka Arahi 7. We're also going to compare it to the Clifton 9 as well as the Gaviota 5. Let's run with it. Now before we get started, I do want to say that these shoes were provided to me by Road Runner Sports. However, no one had a chance to preview this video, and this file synopsis is my own. I'd also like to say please leave a like on the video and consider subscribing. Here we go. If you're not familiar with the Hoka running shoe line, the Arahi is their max cushion stability road running shoe. Great for runners that need some support on the medial side. It keeps your foot from rolling inwards or over pronating. This is basically the stability counterpart of the Hoka Clifton. So if you like the Hoka Clifton, which is an incredibly popular neutral max cushion daily trainer, but needs some more guidance, that is where the Arahi comes in. And then of course we have the redesigned Gaviota 5, which used to share a lot of similarities with the Arahi series, but basically the Gaviota is an ultra max cushion or super thick stability running shoe. So if you like the Arahi but need some more cushioning and guidance, that is where the Gaviota comes in. So I hope that makes sense, but that's kind of the quick version of the Hoka running shoe lineup with regards to the Arahi. As far as the price goes, the Arahi 7 and the Clifton 9 both cost $145, a $5 increase compared to last year, while the Gaviota 5 comes in at $175. The Arahi 7 does gain just a little bit of weight, going from roughly 9.8 ounces now to 9.9, which is just a little bit heavier compared to the Clifton, which comes in at 9.4 for men's size 10. And then you have the Gaviota, which is a full ounce heavier at 10.9 ounces. So the weight is pretty much identical to last year, and the stability version is ever so slightly heavier compared to the neutral version, which is the Clifton. As far as the stack height goes, the Arahi 7 is just an upper update. The midsole remains exactly the same. We have 37 in the heel, 32 in the forefoot for the classic 5mm drop. The Clifton has 1 more millimeter of stack height with 38 in the heel and 33 in the forefoot. And then the Gaviota is a little bit thicker with 39 in the heel and 33 in the forefoot for a 6mm drop, which is 1 more millimeter higher than most other Hoka running shoes. So let's talk about the upper on the Arahi 7 because that's all that changed. The midsole remains exactly the same, and I'm actually quite surprised by this, mainly because the Clifton 9 received some small tweaks and some small improvements, and I was kind of expecting the same treatment here. That's not the case at all. All that really changed is the upper is now in flat knit upper instead of the engineered mesh we saw previously. So this flat knit material has a softer kind of fabric-like feel to it, and does run a little bit warmer. The ventilation is not bad, it's just not as good compared to the engineered mesh we saw on the Arahi 6. The fit and feel feels roughly the same, maybe, just maybe a smidge more volume to it here this year, but otherwise I think it's pretty comparable. Hoka did say they added more padding to the tongue, which is the case, but it's not a massive increase. I will say the Arahi 7 does have more cushion in the tongue compared to the Clifton and the Gaviota. The only other small change I can notice was towards the back of the shoe. I think last year they had some stitching on the internal part of the liner on the heel counter, and that's no longer the case. It's now this very kind of smooth, one-piece, consistent feel. The tongue is gusseted with strips of elastic material on the lateral and medial side to keep it in place, and I think it works quite well. Again, very familiar, very similar experience to last year. Thought the lockdown and fit was solid, fit true to size, and I didn't feel like it was too narrow either. I think some Hoka shoes do have that issue. And for me, that just wasn't the case. I was actually quite surprised Hoka went with this flat knit material, mainly because it's so much different compared to the Gaviota and the Clifton. The Gaviota, I think, has a great fit to it. However, the big difference here is if you have a higher volume foot or if you like a wide toe box, I think the Gaviota is the better option, mainly because when I tried this on, I was shocked to find out how much room there was in the toe box here. It's not typically a Hoka thing, and I'm actually liking the direction they were going, and I was kind of hoping they would do the same thing with the Arahi. The Arahi, again, more traditional fit, where the Gaviota just tons of room. So higher volume foot, I would probably recommend the Gaviota. I thought the lockdown was good, but just has a little bit more of an accommodating feel, and this kind of synthetic engineered mesh is much more breathable. And then if we compare the upper here on the Clifton 9, I do have to add an asterisk here, mainly because Hoka gave me a 12.5 compared to my regular size 13 for both the Arahi and the Gaviota. So a slightly smaller fit than I would have liked, but I did my best to try to compare these two. Now, the Clifton has kind of this weird knit hybrid engineered mesh material, which is more breathable than the Arahi, but less breathable compared to the Gaviota. So I think it works quite well. And honestly, when trying these two shoes, based on my best guess, they have a similar fit. I'm happy to see they gave us a little bit more volume here on the Clifton 9 compared to the Clifton 8. But if you're someone who wears your typical size 10 on the Clifton, I think you can kind of go true to size or the same kind of fit here on the Arahi 7 as well. And now moving on to the midsoles. Again, the Arahi 7 is just an upper update. The midsole remains exactly the same compared to last year. This is Hoka's Max Cushion Stability option, which means its goal is to keep you from rolling inwards or over pronating, and they use something called a J-frame. Now, the colorway here isn't the best to demonstrate this dual density midsole, so I'll do my best to kind of show you how it gives you that guidance. So if you flip the Arahi around to the outsole, you can see these two different kinds of foams, Again, this colorway is not the best, but essentially you have a firmer foam that starts partway up on the lateral side, wraps down around the heel, and extends mostly up the medial side. Now, this J shape is why they call it the J-frame, and it's kind of a clip that's around your heel and then extends all the way up on the medial side as well to keep you, again, from rolling inwards. However, the Gaviota 5 uses a completely different stability mechanism. It used to use a similar version of the J-frame like we see here with the Arahi 7. However, on the 5th version, they updated it to something called an H-frame, which is pretty much what it sounds like. And I'll put a picture on the screen so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Basically, this top layer of blue foam is a bit more firm, so as you sink further into it, it kind of gives you some guidance and support. And I think this works pretty well for those that happen to supinate or roll outwards, and those who happen to pronate or roll inwards. So a slightly more versatile setup that kind of accommodates a wider variety of runners and walkers. And then if we move over to the Clifton 9, this has no stability mechanisms because this is a neutral daily trainer, which means the midsole is consistent through and through. It only has one kind of compression molded EVA foam. And I will say this is noticeably softer compared to the Arahi, which I do consider to be a rather firm daily trainer. I'll also say that the Arahi 7 is going to be much more rigid and stiff compared to the Clifton, which makes sense because this is a stability shoe and you have that firmer foam, which runs pretty much the full length of the shoe itself. However, even though the shoe is more stiff and rigid, it does, I think, help you notice that rocker geometry, which rolls you along very nicely. And I do consider this to be a quite versatile stability daily trainer. And speaking of the stability, it absolutely accomplishes its job of giving you that guidance. You notice kind of that clip of firmer foam around the back part of your foot, and then that medial support, which keeps your foot from rolling inwards. And honestly, I think this is quite enjoyable for a stability shoe. Kind of take it on a wide variety of runs. And if you're someone who doesn't mind the firmer feel to it, I think this will be a solid option. And again, I think the only major difference here is the upper. So if you've tried the previous versions or you've seen the previous Arahi, this is going to be pretty much identical. Now, if we compare it to the Gaviota is kind of a whole nother ball of wax, mainly because the midsole, if you line these suckers up, you'll notice that you have a much wider platform on the Gaviota. It just has a ton more base to it, a lot more ground contact, and just feels significantly bulkier. It's going to have a softer feel to it, so if you're someone who's coming from the Clifton and kind of you miss that squish and plushness underfoot, I think the Arahi is going to do the job. Now, it's not going to be as soft or squishy compared to some other Ultramax cushion options, but because it is a stability running shoe, I think it does a good job of kind of walking that line. I'll also say I think that the Gaviota isn't as versatile compared to the Arahi. This just doesn't work as well at those faster paces, mainly because you just have a lot more ground contact, and this is going to be much heavier and bulkier compared to its smaller stability counterpart, which again just makes sense. The big thing here is this is more of kind of a cruiser long haul shoe, where I think the Arahi kind of gives you a more kind of classic training feel, and I think has a wider range of runs available to it. So overall, this is a rather small update to the Arahi series. Basically, they just gave us a flat knit upper, some additional padding to the tongue, and a more consistent fabric towards the back part of the ankle and Achilles area. We'll say this flat knit material is going to be a bit more warm compared to the engineered mesh we saw last year, but I do think is quite comfortable. It has kind of that same fit and feel to it. The midsole is going to be on the firmer side of things, provides a very classic kind of Hoka J-frame experience, does an excellent job of keeping your foot from rolling inwards, and then that firm clip of J-frame foam towards the back part of the shoe kind of helps stabilize your ankle and gives you that guidance while you run. If you're coming from the Hoka Clifton, be prepared for, again, a firmer ride. There's not a whole lot of energy turn or squish to this midsole. And if you're someone who likes a wider toe box, or if you happen to supinate or just want a little bit more cushion underfoot, I think that's where the Gaviota series comes in. Although this is going to be a much bulkier and heavier option, which I don't think is going to be as fast compared to the Arahi 7. So I hope that kind of clears things up and helps you kind of decide between these different options. Personally, I think it works quite well and is a fun stability option to throw on, especially if you really kind of enjoy rocker geometry with it, again, a slightly firmer ride overall. So let me know, what do you think of this updated Arahi, and which Hoka running shoe would you personally go to for your daily miles? I would love to hear from you. Well, I'm Ryan from Ryan's Running Reviews, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks.